Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. No poder criativo que nasce dos palcos, orquestras, das artes, das ruas e dos museus. Na valorização das diversas identidades brasileiras e na preservação de memórias. É valorizando a cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
A inteligência artificial não consegue definir em uma imagem do que vão ser feitos os próximos 100 anos. Porque o futuro não vai ser feito de uma imagem só. Vai ser feito dos que dizem sim, de quem não aceita um não como resposta e de quem pergunta, por que não? O futuro será feito de você, que assim como o Itaú, é feito de futuro.
Ministério da Cultura e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 22ª Flip, Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. A Flip conta com benefício da Lei Federal de Incentivo à Cultura, PRONAC 235060, e possui acessibilidade para pessoas com deficiências física, visual e auditiva. Tem patrocínio Master, Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Ouro, Itaú, CCR e Suzano. Patrocínio Prata, Mac Móveis, Eletronuclear, O Globo e Sesc. Patrocínio Bronze, Sebrae e Globo Livros. Parceria institucional, Prefeitura de Paraty, Secretaria Estadual de Turismo do Rio de Janeiro e Museu do Território. É uma concepção Associação Casa Azul. Realização, Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução. Obrigada e boa mesa. Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
O casarão foi feito dinheiro, uma ruína, e aí nós começamos a restaurar esse casarão. E depois esse lugar virou um ícone da noite, onde pessoas de todos os níveis sociais frequentavam, toda essa gama de pessoas do mundo inteiro, e os caiçaras se encontravam. Tinha uma relação muito grande, né, com os caiçaras e as pessoas do mundo inteiro. Enfim, aquilo ali virava assim uma coisa surreal, no meio do nada, entendeu? Acontecia. As pessoas sabiam que ali tinha um lugar aberto, que ali poderiam se divertir, encontrar pessoas. sempre gostei da dança, era um lugar de dança também, o bar. As pessoas dançavam no balcão, pô. Essa arte da rua, do cotidiano que acontecia ali dentro também. Isso era muito bacana, né?
Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
Boa tarde.
Good afternoon.
Vamos chegando a mais uma mesa dessa
So
Flip
we're
que tá
going
tão
to start
bonita, com
another
mesas tão
round table at this
importantes.
Flip, which is
Antes de
such a
começar,
beautiful
eu queria
event
mais
with
uma
very
vez
important
agradecer
round tables. And
nossos
before
intérpretes
starting,
e
I would
nossas
like to thank
intérpretes
again
de
our
sinais, que eu não tinha agradecido até agora.
oral
Cada
language
mesa eu lembro de
interpreters and
mais
sign
gente que eu
language
tinha que
interpreters. At
agradecer.
every
Talvez
round
na
table, I
última eu
remember to
consiga
thank
contemplar
more
todo
people,
mundo.
and maybe the
Essa
last
é uma
one I will
mesa
be able
muito
to say thank you to
especial
everyone
e que
involved in the
me
event.
dá
This is
uma
a very
alegria,
special
porque a
round table because it makes me
gente da
very
minha
happy because
geração,
people from my
sobretudo, teve uma
generation,
ideia de
above all,
história do
we
Brasil,
had an idea
daquela
or we
formal,
were
muito
taught
contada pelos
a
portugueses e que
history of
deixou
Brazil, which
tanta
was very
coisa
formal, told by the
faltando.
Portuguese,
Hoje,
and
por
that
exemplo, a gente tem o
left
projeto
so many
Querino, que é
things
podcast
out.
que
We have
reconta a
the
história
Querido
a partir do
Project,
ponto
which
de
is a
vista
podcast
dos
retelling
negros
history from the
escravizados, o que é
standpoint
uma
of
coisa
enslaved
incrível.
black people, which
E esses
is
dois livros
incredible. And
são
those two
criações
books that we're going to
literárias
talk about today, they are
deslumbrantes que ajudam a
amazing
recontar
literary
essa história de
creations
outro
that
ponto de
help
vista,
retell the
que é
story
muito
from a
rico.
different standpoint, which
Para
is
mediar essa
very
conversa,
rich.
vou
And
chamar Rita
to
Palmeira, que é
moderate
uma
the conversation,
editora,
I invite Rita
crítica
Palmeira,
literária e curadora da
a
livraria
publisher,
Megafauna em São
literary
Paulo.
critics, and
Rita.
creator of the Megafauna bookstore in São Paulo. Rita.
Eu queria chamar o Odorico Leal
And
e a
I would
Micheliny
like to call
Verunschk ao
Odorico
palco.
Leal and Micheliny Verunschk to the stage.
Ó, e não me deixem esquecer que tem esse
Do not let me
relógio aqui, que
forget
eu
that
sempre
there
esqueço
is
de história do tempo.
a
Bom,
time watch here.
boa
I
tarde
always forget about the
a
time.
todas e
And so,
todos.
good afternoon,
É
everyone.
uma alegria voltar
It
a
is a
Flip
great joy to be back
e
at
estar
Flip
aqui nessa
and
mesa
to
que
be
reúne a
here
Micheliny
at this
Verunschk
round
e o
table,
Odorico
bringing
Leal.
together Micheliny Verunschk
Eu queria
and Odorico
agradecer
Leal. And
muito
I
a
would like
Ana
to
Lima
thank very much
Cecílio,
Ana Lima Cecílio,
curadora dessa edição,
the
pelo
curator of
convite.
this
A
edition
Ana é
of
minha
the
amiga, uma
event, for the
alegria vê-la
invitation.
curadora
She's a good
dessa
friend,
festa que
and
eu
it is a
amo.
joy to see her
A Flip
playing this role.
chega a esta 22ª edição
Arrives
e
at
para
this
que a gente
22nd
esteja aqui
edition,
na
and so that we
tenda
are
ou no telão,
here
foi necessário,
at this
como
room
sempre,
or
o trabalho de
outside on the
muita
screen,
gente.
the work of many
Então,
people
obrigada
was
também
needed.
à
So
enorme
thank you
equipe que
also
faz a
to
Flip
the
e que faz da
numerous
Flip uma
people
verdadeira
that
festa.
organize Flip and that make it a true celebration.
Nessa mesa, a gente
At
tem
this round table,
escritor
at
estreante
this panel, we
e
have
uma escritora
a
veterana.
starting writer and a
Mas o livro de contos do
experienced
escritor
one.
estreante
But
anda dando tanto
the
que falar
short story
por sua
book
construção
of the
sofisticada e
beginner
concisa,
writer
que parece coisa
is
de veterano.
so sophisticated that
E a
it looks
escritora
like
veterana e
something written by an
premiadíssima não
experienced
para de
writer.
se
And the
reinventar.
awarded
2
writer
anos
never
atrás,
stops
ela, que tem pelo
reinventing
menos
herself. 2
21
years
anos de
ago,
carreira literária,
Micheliny,
lançou
who
o seu
has
primeiro
like at
livro
least
de
21
contos,
years of literary
o que
career,
faz dela,
launched her
de algum
first
modo,
short story
estreante,
book, which makes
ou
her a
quase.
beginner also, or
O
almost.
Odorico Leal
Well,
nasceu em
Odorico Leal was
Picos, no
born in
Piauí,
Picos,
em
in the state of Piauí,
1983.
in
Ele morou em
1983. He lived in
Fortaleza, onde ele
Fortaleza,
cursou letras.
in which
Depois ele
he
viveu em Belo
studied letters,
Horizonte,
and then he
onde fez
lived
o
in Belo
mestrado em teoria
Horizonte,
literária.
in which
E
he
finalmente foi para São
got a
Paulo,
master's
onde
in
ele fez seu
literary
doutorado em
theory,
literatura
and
brasileira
then
e
he
onde ele
went
vive
to
até hoje.
São Paulo, where he's
Ainda que a sua
living
pesquisa
today.
seja sobre
And even though
poesia,
his
o Odorico é
research is on
contista.
poetry,
Autor
Odorico writes short
de
stories. He's the
Nostalgias
author
Canibais,
of
que saiu
Nostalgias
neste ano
Canibais,
pela INE.
Cannibal Nostalgias, which was
Ele é também
published
crítico
this
literário,
year. He's also a
colaborador
literary
de
critic,
vários veículos de
and he
imprensa,
collaborates with many
professor e tradutor.
press
Ou seja, não é tão estreante
publications
assim.
or outlets, and he's
Aliás,
not such
tradutor de
a beginner.
escritores
Actually,
como
he
Toni
translates
Morrison,
writers
Richard
such as
Matar
Toni Morrison,
e Elif
Richard
Bachman.
Matar, and Elif Bachman.
A Micheliny Verunschk nasceu em 72 em Recife,
Micheliny Verunschk was
mas
born in
cresceu em Arco Verde, no
1972
sertão
in
pernambucano.
Recife, but she was
Ela
raised
é
in Arco
historiadora
Verde
e
in Pernambuco.
escritora. Tem vários
She is
livros
a historian and
publicados
a
e, como eu
writer
já
with many
mencionei,
books
eles
published, and
abarcam
as I already
gêneros
mentioned, they
variados,
cover
conto, poesia
different
e romance.
genres, short stories,
Seu primeiro
poetry,
livro de
novels, and her
poemas,
first
Geografia Íntima do Deserto,
poetry
que saiu
book,
pela Landi,
Geografia
em
Íntima do
2003,
Deserto,
foi
Intimate
finalista do
Geography
Prêmio
of the
Portugal
Desert,
Telecom,
was a
que
finalist
hoje é o Prêmio Oceanos.
for the
Seu
Portugal
primeiro
Telecom
romance, Nossa
Award,
Teresa,
the
Vida e Morte de uma Santa
Oceanos
Suicida, que
Award
saiu pela
now.
Patois
Her
em
first novel, which
2014,
was published by
levou o
Patois
Prêmio
in
São Paulo de Literatura.
2014,
Seus três romances
Nossa
seguintes,
Teresa, Vida
que
e Morte de uma
compõem a
Santa
assim
Suicida,
chamada Trilogia
was
Infernal,
also the winner of
saíram
the São
também
Paulo
pela Patois. São
Literature
eles,
Award.
Aqui no
And
Coração do
other
Inferno, de
novels were
2016,
also published by
O
Patois,
Peso do
Aqui no
Coração de
Coração
um
do
Homem,
Inferno,
de
2016, O
2017,
Peso do
e
Coração de um
Amor,
Homem,
esse Obstáculo, de
2017,
2018.
and Amor,
Desde
esse
seu
Obstáculo in
penúltimo romance,
2018. Since her
O
last
Som
but
do
one
Rugido da
novel, O Som do
ela é
Rugido da
editada pela
Onça, The
Companhia das
Sound of the
Letras. Esse
Jaguar's
aqui
Roar.
saiu em 2021.
Well, it was
né?
published in 2021
Esse
by
livro ganhou o
Companhia das
Jabuti
Letras,
de
and
melhor
it
romance
won the
literário.
Jabuti Award
No ano
of
passado,
Best Literary
publicou seu
Novel.
sexto
Last year,
romance,
she published her
que é o
sixth
Caminhando com
novel,
os Mortos,
Caminhando
também
com
pela
os Mortos,
companhia.
Walking with the Dead, also published by Companhia
O
das
Círculo de
Letras Publishing
Poemas
House.
reuniu seu livro de
Her
estreia,
poetry cycle
outros livros
includes
de
her
poesia seus e alguns
first book,
poemas esparsos
some other
de
poetry
outros
books,
livros
and
não reunidos integralmente
elements of other
num
books that were
volume que
not
chama Geografia
necessarily
Íntima do
put together
Deserto
in
e
a
Outras Paisagens
book called
Reunidas,
Geografia
que
Íntima do
saiu
Deserto
esse
e
ano.
Outras Paisagens Reunidas.
A Martelo, casa
Published in
editorial, que havia
2024,
publicado seus
Martelo
livros de
Editorial
poemas, Maravilhas
Publishing
Banais,
House,
em
that published
2017,
her
e o Movimento
poetry
dos
book
Pássaros, em
in
2020,
2017,
também
including O Movimento
publicou
dos Pássaros in
Desmoronamentos.
2020, also published
Ixi, cadê esse aqui?
Desmoronamentos
Seu
in
livro de contos,
2022, her short
em
story book.
2022, que venceu o prêmio Biblioteca Nacional nessa
The winner
categoria.
of the National Library
Bom, a
Award in this
Micheliny é tão
category. So
prolífica que eu devo ter
Micheliny
deixado
is
de mencionar
such
algum
a
livro
productive
seu.
writer
Contando aqui,
that
eu vi que eu mencionei 11, e ela ontem me
I
contou
probably
que
forgot
publicou 13.
some of her
Pelo que eu já
publications.
peço
I
desculpas,
counted
porque eu já
11 and
começo
she told me
cometendo uma
yesterday
gafe.
that she published
Mas, na
13,
verdade, foi
so
uma
I'm sorry
brincadeira.
for
Esses
this.
livros eu
Well,
não
it is
mencionei porque
actually a
eles
joke.
estão
I did not
incluídos,
mention
os
those
que
two
faltavam,
other
estão
books because they
nessa espécie de
are
antologia
included in
coletânea
this
publicada pelo
collection or
Círculo.
anthology that was
Bom, boa
published
tarde, Micheliny
by
e
Circle.
Odorico.
So, good afternoon,
Queria
Micheliny
começar
and Odorico,
falando
and I would
pouco
like
da
to start by
sinopse dessa
talking
mesa que a
about
Ana retomou na
the
apresentação
summary
dela.
of this
A
panel.
sinopse sugere que a literatura
suggests
talvez
that
seja,
literature
eu abro aspas, a forma de
maybe
narrar
is,
mais apta a compreender um
the
país
form
repleto
of
de
narrative
contradições.
most capable of
Eu
understanding
pergunto
a
isso
country
também
full
porque a
of
Micheliny já
contradictions. And
reivindicou a ruína como uma
I go
espécie
there
de
because
imagem
Micheliny
condutora da sua
also
obra.
used the image of ruins
E o
as
livro do Odorico, por outros caminhos, também aponta para certa
a
ruína.
roadmap to
Então,
her
queria
works.
começar
And
com essa
Odorico's
pergunta
book
fácil
also addresses the
para
topic
vocês,
of ruins.
dando as
So I would like to
a boa
start
tarde
with
às
this
duas
very
juntas.
easy question for both
Obrigada.
of you.
Você quer ir primeiro?
Ladies first.
Would you like to go first?
Eu nem ouvi direito a pergunta.
Okay, I couldn't even hear the
Eu ainda tô
question
sentando
because
aqui,
I'm
entendeu?
still like arriving here.
Em primeiro lugar, eu
And
queria agradecer
first of all, I would
demais a
like to
ter me
thank
convidado.
Anna
E
for
todo
the
mundo da Flip, foi muito
invitation,
carinhoso
and
e
also
acolhedor.
everyone at Flip has been very welcoming.
Queria dizer também que
And
me
I
falaram
would
para
also
sentar
like
aqui no
to
meio.
say
Eu
that
não
I was
sentaria aqui
told
na
to sit
cadeira do meio.
in the
Mas
middle
disseram,
chair, but
senta no meio
I
e
would
tudo
never
mais.
do it
Pareceu
myself.
pouco.
It
E
was strange to me.
quanto à
But
pergunta,
as for
eu
the
ouvi a
question,
palavra
I heard
contradição,
the
essa
word
pergunta, se a
contradiction.
literatura é a melhor forma
If
para se lidar com as
literature is the best way
contradições da
to
realidade, né?
tackle reality
Eu
contradictions,
acho que é uma pergunta assim,
I think that
é um pouco esperançosa assim, né, de que a literatura
it's
seja capaz
a
de
little bit
lidar
of a
com as
hopeful
contradições,
question.
a
Well,
melhor
hoping
forma de
that literature is
expressar
capable
as
of
contradições
tackling
realidade,
contradictions of
porque
reality
é
because
uma questão que eu tenho visto
this
muitos
is a
escritores
question
falando
that
isso, assim, como
I hear many
a
writers
literatura, a
asking,
ficção
well, how can literature or
tem
fiction
se deparado com uma realidade tão contraditória,
face such a
Então,
contradictory reality and also at the
já
same
tão
time
na fonte, assim, a própria realidade já é tão paródica
reality itself is
que
so much of a parody that it becomes a little bit difficult to work it in the literary sense. If you think of the Brazilian contradictions nowadays, we've just had an election in which a candidate in São Paulo, well, I live in São Paulo, so I was involved in the elections there. During a debate, he mentions the suicide of the father of another candidate, accuses the family of this candidate to lead her father to suicide just by mentioning this in a debate. This is something unimaginable. And at the same time, this same candidate, when he is incapable of reaching the second turn, there are hundreds of evangelical people crying in the streets because he was not elected or could not run for in the second turn of elections. And so there is a huge contradiction between the actions and the teachings of Christ. And so it's such an unreal or surreal reality that literature needs in some way to work with things that look real, and you need to find some kind of links or ideas that make reality more understandable through suggestion, more than trying to express or to resolve contradictions. The contradictions in reality, in the Brazilian reality, cannot be solved. But the question is literature the best way to address it? Well, as a writer, I would say yes. Probably movie makers would say no, it's not literature. But I believe so.
Boa tarde.
Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here at FLIP and also in Paraty. And this is a question.
Não tem como fugir disso que o Odorico fala, né? A realidade
to answer the question, we cannot avoid going into the same path that Odorico, because reality is such an intangible thing. It's so out of place that it's difficult for the writer to deal with the material of reality. It is always on the threshold of what is
da eleição, né, esse exemplo da eleição,
what looks
que é exemplo muito
real.
Forte, mas a gente vive nessas sociedades
what is believable, and so we live in those societies that are that inherited coloniality, and we live in a kind of suspended world because we are not able to solve our past. The past is always coming back. And one day, if you wake up and you turn on the news, and it's like 2020 or 19, and there are people with signs on which you read family, tradition, society, and you ask yourself, what times are those? Where am I? And then you wake up another day and there's a pandemic, and you are back in the times of the plague. So it's a very difficult reality. It's a moving reality in which you, as a writer, as an artist, as a thinker, you need to reorganize your world and the way you look at the world to answer those questions. And I don't know if literature has all the elements to answer to this reality. I think that maybe literature could add other aspects and maybe work with it, but also create new problems. And this is good, because I think that the more we problematize, the more we move into this moving world, the more we find creative solutions that in literature and the arts in general.
I never thought I was going to say this, but cannibalism will maybe bring the two of you together, joins you. Not only rock, but then you can talk about rock later on, your relation to rock. This is something I've learned during lunch date. This is something I always do to get to know our authors better. They have a long history with rock and roll. But the fact is, cannibalism will bring you together, or does bring you together. Never thought I would say this in public, but anyways, I would like to explain why I'm saying this. In the initial story of Odorico's book, it's called Paraíso Canibal, Cannibal Paradise. This essay, or short story, will announce the practice, and he'll talk a little bit about that. We said that I was going to maybe talk about the books, and they will tell a little bit about the stories of these books. But in this specific short story, not only this short story, but the narrator will announce the cannibal practice, and this will, of course, give the name to the book. The book is called Nostalgias Canibais, Cannibal Nostalgia, will also show in the sound of the jaguar's roar, but it will also appear in Micheliny's work in a broader sense. Cannibalism in both your books is a practice, but it's also a metaphor, an imagery. And I would like you to talk a little bit about how you see this in your work. And I will ask you to read excerpts of your book so that people will sink in. If you haven't yet read them, please do so, and you will get used to your writing. So I suggested that Micheliny would start her part, and I have to give her her book. If you could hand it, she doesn't have her book with her. So Micheliny would read excerpts of B de Bruxa, B of Bewitched, or something like that, in a free translation. And Odorico would read an excerpt of the first short story, which is Cannibal Paradise, for us to give the whole idea of cannibalism as an imagery. Should I start, or as you wish? Should I start the reading or talking a little bit about it? I guess we're all cannibals. I said, cannibalism will unite all of you, but we're all cannibals. Of course, I'm not the only one to say that. However, we have in this country's history, we have not only anthropophagic practices of those who inhabited this country, this land, actually. We have our grounding, which is horrible, the thing that creates us, our foundations. It's horrible, but it's magical at the same time. Cannibalism is what I will get from my opponent, from my enemy, what he has of the best thing he has to offer. Well, we sometimes don't want to eat what we don't like, but we'll never appropriate. You would never eat. You would never have something you don't like. You will not bring into your body something that is not desired, or at least you shouldn't do it. And obviously, this has something romantic into it when I say this, but also this whole idea of the awfulness, the whole idea of eating someone else. Not metaphorically, but literally. When a cannibal will eat another being, this cannibal will also eat the other person's strength, the person's abilities, their heroism, and that person's dreams. And it's beautiful, ritually speaking, it's beautiful. If we leave behind this whole Western thinking of how horrible cannibalism is, we will be able to perceive, for instance, that in the whole ritual, in the Maya rituals, for instance, what could you offer as the most amazing thing, as the most beautiful and pure thing to the gods? It would be a bleeding heart of that victim of that sacrifice. So romantically speaking, it's beautiful. Visually, it's brutal. But at the same time, and here I'm trying to work with two images, two different stances. One would be of the what is beautiful, and the aesthetical, non-Western beautiful, but also the awfulness, the horrible place, which makes us of a nation of beheaders. This country was built on beheading, of beheading your enemy. And when I bring this into my work, into my literature, because different cannibals will surpass my work, I try to bring this place which is simultaneously beautiful and also horrible, or a sign of horror. So now I will read an excerpt, one of my cannibals. I'm going to read an excerpt of B de Bruxa, in a free translation would be B from Bewitched, or W of Witch. It is a poetry, but it's a bit hybrid book. It has something that is a bit theatrical, and this is the dialogue between two witches, two sisters. They're both sorcerers. And I will stop talking and read.
Sister, I ate the feet of my last husband. Why? Why did you do so? Did you waste the bowels? Nice feet, and now I can go wherever I want. Dissonant music. No, man, it's only sex. And speaking of that, you better go now. Well, who's gonna slice and dice it? Me. Well, I get the feet, I get the hands. Well, I drew for the dick. And what about you, honey? Well, you eat the flesh that I'm going to chew the bones. The bones? Yes, the best part of a man. With them, I can make another one, and another one, and still another one. And what do we do with the head? Well, I don't know. Hang it on the door is a lucky charm. Mother always said, yes, call other men in. Hey, don't run away, come here. I am the one who's gonna eat you with my silverware. That's what she said, man. Well, such a fucking crazy chick. And me? What did I do? Of course I ran. What do you think?
Would you like to say? Now it's your turn. So cannibalism. So what does it mean in a cannibal paradise? So the epigraph of the book. Well, just to give you an idea, put things into context. A short story, Paradise Cannibal Paradise, for those who haven't yet read it, it is about a cannibal. A native, an indigenous person, maybe around 1500, and Micheliny was talking about the whole idea of cannibals, of eating in a certain way within anthropophagic rituals. So there's a certain idea of, at the same time, you will be part of that vision. You will see things from your enemy's eyes, and also maybe have different, embed certain potentialities of your body, certain skills. It's as if you were able to eat in the courage, the braveness, the strength of that warrior. It was always a ritualistic context in which all those that were devoured were warriors that had been subjugated, and they would sometimes live together in the tribe as prisoners. They would even they were even married inside the tribe before they were actually eaten. But the cannibal, I imagine, is already a sort of an outsider within the tribe itself, because inside his own tribe he would say that as my brothers like to he says, like to graze on virtues, eat virtues. He likes to eat human flesh. It's an issue. He likes to actually eat human flesh. He's not looking for any kind of virtual ritual or value. So I would say that he will practice a sort of low cannibalism, which is a sort of a concept that in the Anthropophage Manifesto by Oswald de Andrade, he says, he doesn't say that there is the high anthropophagy, but he says there's a higher one that will go in the sense of Micheliny was saying, the virtues, something associated to the ancestors' matriarchy from Pindorama, the name of Brazil, the native name to Brazil. So you will be able, through cannibalism, see the world through different perspectives. So this would be the higher sort of anthropophagy. But in the manifest itself, Oswald de Andrade says that he will highlight certain features of the envy, murder, libel, slander, and there's something else he refers to. And that's what he says, that this low anthropophagy is practiced by cultivated, civilized people. And even though I was not a big fan, he ends up going back to the epigraph of the Paraíso Canibal. So the title of the book is Nostalgia Canibais. It's for sale in the bookshop if anyone's worried. But the short story is Cannibal Paradise, and the epigraph is from Padre Antônio Vieira. It's a sermon from Padre Antônio Vieira. It's very well known, in which Padre Antônio Vieira says, well, do you think, in a nutshell, of course, it's a very long thing, saying, he just says in a nutshell, oh, do you think that only the Tapuyas, the native population, will eat one another? And already in the Tapuyas, a name of a people, they were considered savages, the most savage people, and the Tupis were the good savages, so to speak. So, do you think that only the Tapuyas will eat one another? And then he writes, well, the butchery is the butchery we have here. It's a much greater butchery here. It is, you eat a lot more of white people here. And so this is the so-called low anthropophagy. They will eat each other to extinguish one another. And the higher sort will be to devour someone else, to make that person remain in you. And the lower one will be the whole idea of extinction. So it's in the sense that I write. And my cannibal here in the book, at a given moment, he meets a healer, and he drinks this potion. It is a mixture, and he becomes immortal. So he will go through the whole of the Brazilian history from 1500 until our days. So it is a reasonably long short story, maybe 40 pages, and he will go through different ages, and the low anthropophagy will be manifested throughout this history, these centuries, and different activities that he will get involved in. He is a cannibal that will try to participate in this world, the colonizer's world, this world that comes to him, and in doing so, he's able to find momentaneous satisfaction. But he always collapses. He is never able to maintain a project. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. I know I'm taking too long to answer this question, but anyways, this is the whole idea. In my case, I'm already playing with this whole idea of this higher type of anthropophagy, of a Oswald's market, and the lower one. So this is the story. So, as I said, so these are the two topics. On the other hand, if I said all this, but on the other hand, I could also say simply that I wanted to write a story about as a cannibal. That's it. That was the topic that I was attracted to. And so this you didn't explain why. Well, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Actually, these are two topics. One will be the topic of the cannibal and the topic of immortal. This is an immortal cannibal once he takes and drinks this potion. So he will go through different ages, and the excerpt I will read is more or less maybe in maybe 42, 1942, 41, 42, 1941. So Brazil is going through the second, well, the world is going through the Second World War, and Vargas wasn't yet against the Axis. He's still like playing, with both sides, and the cannibal decides to become an industrialist. He wants to become many things throughout his life. So at a given moment, he wants to become a photographer, he wants to play the guitar, and at that moment, he wanted to become a great industrialist. So he ends up, through different paths, he becomes the king of açaí, the little nut. He creates this drink to compete with Guaraná. So he creates açaizinho, the fruit of the açaí, and he's super rich. He's happy because he has created this industry and he's wealthy. Let me find it here. So he goes to meet Getúlio Vargas, and he talks to Getúlio Vargas so that he can become the king of açaí. So I'll read this excerpt. Maybe it might be a little bit too long, I'm not sure, but I'll do my best. No, please read slowly so that we can savor it. So he always has a partner. This is the other element. He has a sidekick. He always tries to find some kind of a human meeting, but he ends up eating the person anyways. So Ernesto and I left the Casa da Indústria feeling in high spirits. And then a couple of months later, Açaí won Guaraná. And throughout all the years of the war, I was, flying high as a kite. But anyways, at night I would go to the movies. I would saw 3 or 3 times the Atlântida, the Brazilian Hollywood, such as Moleque Tião, Tristezas Não Pagam Dívidas e Não Adianta Chorar. These are titles of films of the Brazilian Hollywood. Ernesto, in a lyrical approach, would toast to the skies. Oh, if this was what life was made of. And I would say, well, don't think too much about it because you will ruin everything. And then we will walk around trying to find pleasure everywhere. However, in the midst of our second golden age, I would ignore my own advice. And little by little, I had certain feverish thoughts. And more than anyone else, I knew that everything that existed will pass. That time was just a trigger of running and then just dwindling down in different histories. And we would drown in the forgetfulness, and all of a sudden something else would become with different rights and indifferent to everything that disappeared, so that we curve and be swollen by the anonymous winds. So that war was what? A ritual. It was a protest of death against death. The difference is that at the end of the day, you have bodies and arms rotting on the streets. And at a given night, going down the stairs of the municipal theater, and surrounded by the people that were coming out of the theater, trying to find their cigarettes and lighters, looking at the immense buildings and the streets around us, and the sadness of all the light posts, I felt very sorry for all those beings that were not eternal. I understood that until then, I was living for centuries and centuries as if I were one of them, fighting with and against them. I was hurting, I was hitting or wanting to hurt myself. I would launch myself in life as if I was in a big carnival. But I was a fake Pierrot. Behind my mask, there was nothing. The songs from the different dances and carnival didn't hurt me because I was hiding from the truth, and it was very simple. I was not one of them. And Ernesto, in whose face I would sometimes see the bones, when he would toast with me, he would toast with a ghost from other times, an elderly man without wrinkles, the loneliest person in the world. So this is just an excerpt from my book. Sorry, I just wanted to say that this short story has one of the most delicious excerpts. Delicious is a good word to use in a round table. I said savor, and so now you're using delicious. So we are all in these different meanings to our words. It's when this character will say that has eaten so many Jesuits that he's burping out Jesuits. So there's lots of humor in Odorico's book, but in this specific essay, short story, right after this excerpt that he read, there are certain parts, it's divided in parts, and he ends up by saying, before I leave, I will take with me, maybe I ate Ernesto, just to take good memories of this golden age. So then later on, he will says, right afterwards, he says, one day I went back to Rio, and I hadn't been there since 1800s, because he's already in the 20th century, so he hadn't gone back yet. So it's very humorous, but we'll go back to this. Oh, you wanted to say something else? Oh, no, just the Jesuits. Okay. So, Micheliny, so Walking with the Dead, Caminhando com os Mortos, your last novel, starts with a dead body of a woman that was burnt alive, and it narrates the death of other women, always in a very violent manner. And the characters are the center of everything, and hatred is always against them. And there's also a gay man who's also equally burnt alive in the story. And fire is like a brand of hatred. Well, this is something that is actually happening currently. You know, we have criminal fires in Brazil happening now. So you're able to narrate these deaths. They're all very violent in such a way that it won't become just common. You conserve the impact of these stories. It's a very strong, very good book. And what I want to read an excerpt that is maybe more to the end of your book, which is a statement given by Rita. She's an expert, I guess. And she says, in this land, we always find the right witch to complain to. That's how it was to Narcisa. She was beheaded, and she had her cut slit, and her throat slit, and she was burnt. Then Celeste and Belinha, and she sorts of names, other people, a list of names, and other characters that I don't want to give. I want to give you any spoilers here. So, and this association of women and witches, and you were reading the W of a witch, bruxa. So the association of women with sorceress and witches is something we see throughout your work. For instance, when I think about the Bendito Seja, a short story in your first short story book. So maybe if you could talk to us a little about this perspective. This is a perspective, a political, feminist, and that will certainly denounce misogyny, the ruling misogyny, unfortunately.
Mulher, ela tem. Eu vou simplificar.
Let me simplify.
É muito mais complexo do que
it is much more complex than what I'm going to say. But the woman plays two roles that are socially marked in patriarchal society.
Ou ela é a santa,
she's either the saint or the prostitute, either the saint or the witch. And curiously, and we were talking about it yesterday, the saint, how can a woman become a saint? She's a saint because of suffering. There's a name maybe for this. If you take, let's say, the geography. I think it's the geography of the Catholic Church. There is a huge number of sanctified women, all of them young women, all of them marked by suffering and also marked by a misogynistic suffering, like Saint Lucia, whose eyes were taken. Saint Agatha, I don't remember if she had her breasts or teeth extracted, but they were always women that were trying to escape marriage, and they end up being forced into conversion. And the witch also, how does the witch become a witch? It's also through suffering. So there is a very thin line separating one from the other. There is a very thin line defining how a woman becomes a saint or a witch. And so we have a society that actually hates
que de fato
women,
odeia o corpo da mulher,
hates
odeia
women's
essa alteridade que a
bodies
mulher
and this
representa.
alterity
Não
that
fosse
they
assim, a
represent.
gente não abria todos os dias
If it weren't like this, we
o
wouldn't
noticiário
open the
e ver
newspaper
que não é só o
every day,
assassinato,
and we wouldn't
não é
see
só o
that it's not only
feminicídio.
about killing
E
women.
nisso a gente volta para aquilo do início da nossa
And then
conversa,
we
de
go
que a
back to the
realidade
beginning
ela
of
se
our
torna
conversation, because reality, again,
mais ficcional do que a
becomes
própria
more
ficção,
fictional than fiction
porque não
itself.
basta matar,
Because
é
it's
preciso
not enough to
destruir
kill.
e
You need to
arruinar
destroy,
tudo
to
que
ruin
esse indivíduo
everything that
significa,
person means.
né? Então, quando você me diz, olha, você
So
não
when you
banaliza
say,
as
well,
mortes dessas
you don't
personagens,
trivialize the
é
death
porque
of those
eu acho,
characters.
eu acredito com muita força
I
que não é
believe, I
possível
strongly
que a gente
believe
passe por
that
essas
it's not
histórias
possible
que repetem, repetem, repetem
to
violências,
know those
que a gente
stories
passe
that
por isso
repeat
com um
and
olhar
repeat
naturalizado.
violence with a
É
naturalized
preciso que a gente enxergue para além do número, para além da
view.
estatística.
We need to
É
look
preciso que a
beyond
gente se comova
statistics, beyond figures.
verdadeiramente
We need
com
really to be
cada
moved
uma dessas vidas perdidas.
by each of
Então,
those
eu acho que o desafio
lives that are lost.
que eu tenho
I think
no
that
caminhando com os
the
mortos
challenge that I
é
find in
trazer
walking with the dead,
essa
caminhando com os mortos,
individualidade, é
is to
trazer
bring this individuality,
esse corpo
this
glorioso, porque
glorious
o corpo
body.
glorioso
Because why glorious
nossos
body?
corpos,
Because
é o nosso corpo vivo,
I mean
é o
by
nosso
this,
corpo
our
pleno.
bodies, our
Isso é um
living
corpo
body,
glorioso.
our full
É esse corpo glorioso que todo dia
body. This
está
is a
nas páginas
glorious body
policiais,
that we
arruinado.
find
Então, quando a
every
gente
day
olha
on the
para cada
news
uma dessas
ruined.
individualidades, para cada
So
uma
when
dessas
we look at
histórias e
those,
diz,
all of
aqui
those
tem uma
individualities
história,
and those stories,
essa
we
história
say,
é
well,
mais do
there's
que
a story
número,
here, and this story is
gente não
more than a
banaliza.
number. We do not trivialize it.
Então, eu fico feliz quando você diz isso,
So
porque
I'm glad when you say it.
O que aconteceu?
alguma coisa,
Sorry, something's
alguma
happening.
coisa se moveu.
Something's moving.
Perdi um pouco o...
Até eu.
I'm sorry, I lost my train of
Quando você
thought.
ficou feliz, quando
Yeah,
você
you were
disse que
happy.
você não banaliza.
Yeah.
Porque eu realmente
Yeah, because I was saying
tentei
that I'm
dar
glad when you say that, that
essa
I do not
carga,
trivialize it, because
né,
I really wanted
individual,
to
esse afeto,
convey
né,
this
para cada uma dessas personagens. Tem
individual
uma personagem em particular,
importance
talvez eu dê
and
pouco de
affection
spoiler, mas
of
espero,
each character. There is a character, and I don't
que o
want to
spoiler não impeça
give any
de vocês
spoiler. Well, I
comprarem o
hope the
livro,
spoiler
fazer
does
o
not
marketing
prevent you
momento.
from reading the book, my marketing moment
Mas,
now.
na verdade, não é
And
um spoiler,
actually,
o
it's not a
motivo inicial
spoiler.
desse
It's
romance,
an
Caminhando com os
initial
Mortos, que é
motive of
uma
this
família,
novel, Walking with the Dead. It's a
que
family,
mata a
a
filha,
family that kills their
porque,
daughter
ela
because
não segue os
she
preceitos
doesn't
religiosos da
follow
família.
the religious
E a gente tem uma mãe
rules
que
of the
mata a
family,
filha.
and so
E
there
é
is
muito
a
fácil
mother
odiar
that kills her
personagem
daughter.
desse. É muito
And
fácil
it's
transformar
very easy to
personagem
hate
desses
a character
num
like this. It's very
num
easy to
vilão.
transform this character
É muito
in
fácil criar
a bad character
vilã.
or villain.
Mas eu tento dar para essa mulher,
But I try to give this
Lourença, o nome dela,
woman,
uma
Lorenza,
humanidade
that's her name,
que
a sense of humanity,
a humanidade que ela tem.
the humanity
Ela
that
fala
she
que
has.
é um ritual de
Yeah,
exorcismo.
she
Não era pra ela
says
morrer, né?
it,
Não era pra
it
ela
was.
morrer. Ela
She said it
acredita que
was
tá
an
fazendo bem pra
exorcism
filha.
ritual. The
Então,
intention was not to kill.
retirar
Yes, she
essa
believed she was
mulher
doing
da
something good to her
categoria
daughter.
monstro,
So taking this
colocar essa
woman
mulher
out
na
of the
categoria ser
monster
humano
category and
foi
bringing it to
desafio
the
pra mim.
human being category was a
dotar
challenge
essa
for
personagem
me
de humanidade,
to
porque
offer.
mas aí
To
você
give
tá,
humanity to this character was a challenge.
diminuindo o sofrimento da vítima.
But then you are reducing
Eu tô dando
the suffering of the
nuances pra cada
victim.
personagem,
No, I'm not.
nuances
I
de
am
humanidade. Eu quero que
I am
que o meu
adding
personagem
nuances
se mantenha de
to
pé.
each character.
E pra
I
ele
want
se manter de
my
pé, ele tem que ter,
character to
esse lado
sustain itself,
terrível,
and
mas ele também tem que
to
ter,
do so, they need to have
aquilo
this
que
terrible
faz a
side,
gente
but
como
also
tal.
something that makes them act as such.
Bom, vamos para o humor do Odorico.
Well,
depois
let's move to
da
Odorico's
fogueira.
sense of humor after the fire, the bonfire. Well, you wrote a short story, and we were mentioning it before, named The Cats, and the narrator follows the standpoint of two cats in an apartment, and of course I cannot tell you very much because it would be a big spoiler, but the cats, they start with something already interesting because they each are named after one of Fernando Pessoa's literary names, and so the narrator is a woman. And so we went through Cannibal Paradise, and then we get to the cats, and then later there is another short story. It's not in the right order, and then the narrator is a woman, a journalist that interviews the author of a book named How Brazil Ruined My Life, and it was the name of the author is Eduardo Aguarde, and it's very important because this author, in the very beginning of the short story, he interrupts the journalist, starts lecturing her, and creates conditions for the unfoldment of the scene of the short story, so that something happens, and she's not really interested in what he was saying, but she accepts the situation, and then he starts to lecture about Brazil and Brazilians, and then there is this very interesting tension between the journalist woman and the thinker, and it's very curious because he says things like nothing serious thrives in Brazil. Brazilians are crazy in the world. Brazil never had a dictatorship. Brazil is even today only forests and indigenous people. So it was a very difficult character, easy to hate, but you do it with a lot of humor, and you draw our attention to this kind of intellectual, and I would like to listen to you talk about this kind of character, because it could be an answer to the first question: how can literature reconfigure the tensions in this in such a complex country like Brazil? You want me to talk about the character? Well, I want you to say something based on my monologue. Here. Monologue, I'm sorry. So, the aspect of humor that I wanted to include in my book is composed of two dimensions, because there is the character, and the character does many things and thinks of many things, but usually this character is talking and thinking those things without them being funny for him. There's no humor, but humor comes through irony when you read it, in this space between the author and the reader in relation to the character. So that's where humor is born within the narrated universe. Well, those characters are serious people, and that's something that I tried to do in some of the short stories of this book, especially in the third short story, which is the story of ugliness, and we will talk about it later. And to create characters both in the story of ugliness and the gardener, which is the last short story, the only one you did not mention, and I am already mentioning it. Yes, we agreed on a script, and I told him I'm going to go short story by short story, but he's moving on faster. And so the characters of this short story themselves, they have their injuries and their issues, but they address it in a comical way, even for themselves. One of the characters is obsessed with his ugliness, and it's an issue for him all the time, and he tries to solve this ugliness in many different ways. And he suffers with the ugliness, but at the same time, he also sees it under a humorous light. And humor is inside the character. and it is presented from the character in this ironic fold. And to speak of the character you were mentioning, this is a character that I imagine like, well, 10 years ago, most of publications and the economy of attention at that time was dedicated to men. There was a greater presence of men. Maybe if we have a statistical study, it will be shown. And nowadays, of course, there is a radical change that we can see in terms of the presence of other actors and players. And one of the things that I try to bring in this character is this dimension of this resentment. It is a writer, a man, and he expresses some kind of hate against Brazil because he's a resentful character, and at the same time he has he sees himself in a comical way, and all the short story is organized like a trap. And there is always some kind of trap, and at a given moment, the character leaves, and the journalist woman keeps thinking of him. Like a writer like this man will never be under the spotlight as it would be in the past. We are no longer at those times, and she reflects about it. And I don't really know where I want to get. Well, we can move on because I'll be back later. I'm sorry. Yeah, while you were talking, I remembered another topic that I believe establishes a bridge between your works. This relationship with the plants in Odorico's books, we can see it in many ways. And in also Walking with the Dead, we also see it when they ask to cut the flowers because they have sexual forms and shapes or something like that. But moving to Caminhando com os Mortos, Walking with the Dead, there is a very difficult topic that you address approach in a very courageous way. And even though I know that you've been addressing this topic for a long time, which is talking about intolerance and the intolerance manifested by the church. Walking with the Dead is when a priest arrives in the village and he changes the relationships, and if on one side the life of those people is improved, or some of the characters have their life improved, it also leads to extreme acts of violence like the one we were mentioning before. And in Nossa Teresa, Vida e Morte de uma Santa, so we see that you also discuss those religious aspects, and so we are speaking of the very complex issues of Brazilian literature, and that was the intention of the panel. But this topic is a very sensitive one and very contemporary one, because Odorico was speaking of elections, and he raised this same topic. So what do you have to say about it? Well, we could say that this is one of my topics. Yes, Micheliny is an expert in the story of saints, women saints. You can spend a whole night listening to her tell you about everything about the saints. Well, I'm very much interested in this, in understanding how Christianity arrives in this continent, and of course it mixes up with other influences. There is a transformation in the Christian practice, and it also leads to this transformation. There is a blending with the cultures and practices of the conquered people. It is a weapon of war, Christianity, in the colonial project. And I investigated from some perspectives in our Teresa or our Nossa Teresa. I look at it from the standpoint of the Catholic Church, this machine that creates sanctity. In Nossa Teresa, there is a teenage girl that will become the first suicidal saint in the Catholic Church. But is it a suicide or a murder? That's the question that permeates the book. And I go back to this point in Coming on the Cons Mortis, Walking with the Dead, when the priest arrives in the village, and also when there is the interventions that he promotes in the village. Something that I always say is that faith is the most expensive fabric, the most beautiful fabric of a people. And I say it as an atheist that I am. And of course, if I see myself in danger, I always ask for the help of every saint. But that's like Jorge Amado. Jorge Amado said, thank God I am an atheist. So this fabric, which is very precious, it is manipulated politically, and that's what I'm interested in. In Walking with the Dead, well, this story is a part of a trilogy, and maybe it will become a 4-volume work. It starts in the sound of the jaguar's roar, in which I investigate how science, not at that moment, that becomes a positivistic science later, how it captures bodies and cultures and violates those territories and bodies. In Walking with the Dead, I revisit the story of Pentecostal churches, not faith. Faith is precious, but the instrumentalization of faith is something that we need to watch carefully and also investigate and probably fight back for the good of the world and for the good of democracy. This instrumentalization needs to be fought. And in my new novel, that will be published next year, After the Thunder, Depois do Trovão, I will go back to this religious issue with a character which is a mixed-race character, and he is the son of a priest and an indigenous woman, and he travels in Brazil, and he goes to inland Brazil to destroy indigenous people in the barbarian war, as it was known. So this topic of religion as a war, a weapon of war, comes back. And why? Because those are very important issues for me, urgent issues for me. This project of thinking of those ruins, it seems to me to be important that those ruins, to some extent, and it reminds me of your character, to some extent, you have a character that always says it. Yes, the journalist, the thinker, the man. To some extent, we need to go beyond those ruins and think of the future. And that's, is that the role of literature? No, not that. I think that literature plays the role of moving us, and but I have my individual issues and political issues that are present in the process, and since it is an urgent issue for me, it ends up being something urgent in my literary project also.
Yes. I'm already in panic because I have only 11 minutes to go. So it's that moment that there are lots of questions, more questions being addressed by the public, but something very important in Micheliny's work, which is this whole idea of the title of this last book shows, which is Walking with the Dead. It seems to be a little bit of this imperative of memory. We have to rethink about the dead and to remind us who were the ones that were victims of violence. And many people are victims of violence in this country. So maybe your literary project has a lot to do with that. Maybe we can go back to this topic and stop looking at the watch. No, we can never forget. Where is Amarildo, for instance, this young worker who was killed in a shanty town in Rio de Janeiro, in Rocinha shanty town in Rio de Janeiro a couple of years ago. His killers were never punished. I will read a couple of excerpts of her book where she talks about the dead. The dead never leave us. They become a greater nation than ourselves. And this is Caminhando com os Mortos, Walking with the Dead. In the Jaguars War, the sound of the Jaguars War, there's this very important moment that says, this is the voice of a dead girl. And there's also a poem called História. It was published in the Cartografia da Noite, Cartography of the Night. And it says, we will unearth our dead. I'm going to suck on their bones. I'm going to dry their faces with dirt and mud. I'm going to work with their arches, their bones. I will work with their dry bones. I will paint all the teeth, the spit, and I will abandon my dreams. I am alive, very much so. Since we don't have that much time, I just want to record this because it's part of this project. She just said that she's going to launch yet another book. So it's 14 books. This is why, I lose track. But I wanted to talk to Odorico and now maybe a little bit about the history of ugliness. This is very funny. The whole book is super funny. The Odorico's book has the power of being very concise and at the same time sophistication that will result in a very interesting prose, and we want him to write more. But I wanted to highlight the history of ugliness, História da Feiura. There are 5 short stories. História da Feiura is right in the middle. And I even said, I don't know if he agreed with this or not, but História da Feiura is a bit different from all the other short stories in that book, not only for the humor, because that is in other short stories, but it has a very structuring job, and also because the subject itself is different. So the whole idea of how you prepare the order of your short stories, and also he uses the whole time, very humorously, he uses adjectives and nouns that have to do with beautiful. So he talks about the author with slippers and had betrayed her whole public. So it's here's a flavorful short story and very funny, very funny. Yeah, so there's História da Feiura, the history of ugliness. This is character who when she was around 5 years of age, this character already understood that he was ugly. So little by little, he gathering evidence that he was ugly. But he came to the realization he was ugly. So at a given moment, he has this story with his father, and that will actually express his ugliness. So this becomes his whole issue in life, of this mirror. And so he tries to tackle this matter, and it's as if the lens through which he will see the world. Everything in terms of being beautiful or ugly. He's always analyzing who's pretty, who is ugly, who is beautiful, who is ugly, and trying to do the economics of ugliness. And this is something that consumes him. And so he will be stuck between these two things. On one hand, he tries to cure himself from this neurosis. He has a psychoanalyst, a psychologist, Dr. Leticia, and he goes to his sessions, and she tries to explain to him that he's not ugly. And he hates hearing that he's not ugly, because he's absolutely sure that he is ugly. And he tries, and he's always between these two issues, between the Dr. Letícia, his psychologist, who proposes something like an internal dealing with this neurosis, and the other one is a dentist, Marina Leite. She's a dentist, and what she has to offer is to do facial harmonization. So he's in between these two characters. So this has everything to do with the rest of the book in Brazil, and what we can do, this understanding we have. In Brazil, we are always stuck between these two things, between trying to cure ourselves in our country, to try to elaborate all our difficulties in the country, or maybe to try to find cosmetic solutions or identity solutions, identifying solutions with a patriotic approach or hues. So it's a great issue, and we talk, well, we badmouth identification, especially with the right-wing rhetoric. But currently, this is this identification of the patriarch and the patriot, not patriarch. And so this is forced upon us. But, well, still, he has another issue, which is the whole idea of being a civil servant. And it has everything to do with Brazil. In the whole cannibal short story, he wants to become, a great industrialist. He wants to be rich, and he wants to be high class. And there's also this whole idea of civil service. He wants to be a civil servant. He wants to be someone that has passed and has, like tenure in the civil service. And he will be safe from all the difficulties. Anything can happen, doesn't matter, because he will be floating above everything else because he's a civil servant with tenure. So this really Brazilian search for having a job or function. So you have that job, you have the, and I also dream, I have the same dream, I also wish, but however, I have to really try to do my best. I am not a civil servant with tenure. So it's horrible to have this feeling, to be this body that will not have eternal revenue as a civil servant, though this is what I meant. We only have 4 minutes, and I'm not even going to look at that. And I'm going to look, because or else Anna is going to kill me here. But anyways. So there's a question from the public here. Maybe, I guess for both of you, but still, it will revisit something that Odorico said. And the question is from Lígia, and it says, today, are there any authors in Brazil that are practicing low anthropophagy, devouring others just for questionable values? And that may be for the two of you. What did she mean by that? I feel there's something there behind this, some underlying matter. You can just say yes or no. You don't have to say who. Well, and yes. So the answer is yes. Well, it's sort of my performance of low anthropophagy. And we were talking about what you said, by eating others just due to questionable matters or values. I can only understand this, that it's not good, right? Well, it doesn't seem very positive. Yes, you're right. And maybe this is a reference to the fact that I write this short story with a native's point of view. No, it has nothing to do with that. Well, Lígia is right there. She said it has nothing to do with that. No, so I see. Okay. Maybe Micheliny can shed some light. Well, there always is in every human activity those who practice the low and the high anthropophagy. So now I'm going to put you in a hard spot here because I was going to close with another question, but really I don't want to close without this question here. And there's this question from the public that in a certain way will deal with this matter I wanted to raise. And I don't know, a part of the public was here in the previous roundtable. There is a moment in which the narrator, very ironic, in Paraíso Canibal, and he says, my Tubinamba eyes will be moved. And I wanted to know from you, how are you able to narrate extermination and ruin without the cynicism that normally goes hand in hand with the different fads or vogues? May I? Okay. Well, before with this roundtable, there was this roundtable that was very symbolic. Right afterward, there's a roundtable about cannibalism with characters that have to do with the native population, the First Nation characters. A couple of years ago, there was a whole idea about, a place of speech, of, maybe this disappeared. Maybe it was just another fad. I don't know. So, but I must confess that I asked myself also about this. It was this discussion I had with my publishing house if there would be any issue in writing this, and we got in touch with that. We tried to understand if it would be worthwhile to publish this, if it was possible to publish this text and not offend anyone. But at the end of the day, until now, I still ask myself, the 50 seconds, I keep looking at this watch here and this clock in front of me. It's a very complex question. Are we living in a regime of scarcity in this economy of stress that we are, of scarcity? And economy of attention. And even if, I keep on bringing this issue here to you because I really want apparently to talk about this. I had this in the back of my mind and I wanted to talk about it. That's it. So I asked myself, it's a very serious question. Would I have the right to tell the story because it is a native population and someone that will in the future become part of Brazil due to his ambitions and fascinations and stories? But I would ask myself, who are these people? And I even thought about this image that then did not leave me anymore. It was maybe they're haunting me. We live in a period of very deep attacks to the First Nations territory, the lands that are reservations, and it's important that we protect this land. And I was writing this book in which, in a certain way, I would actually attack. I would advance into a reservation, for instance. And am I a squatter? Am I a literary squatter? Am I sort of doing a literary squatting? This is a good question because you talk about this in a certain way. But as you say, you talked about fads. So there is this fad. Am I just following a certain fad? No, that's not what I said. I'm saying, not you. I'm not accused. I'm giving you a compliment. No, this is something that I ask myself. Am I a literary squatter? And while I was writing this short story, I did something that I do very well, which is to embed, to bring this issue inward, to hide it deep down, because my passion was to write the story. Once the story comes into existence, and it comes into existence with so many possibilities that we end up giving you into fantasy. You end up writing stories that will burn his imagination. It's not that I couldn't write this story, but there's this fascination that really, tears me apart. And this is a part of it, having this indigenous character. Well, anyways, I hope you enjoy, and I hope I will find a resolution if I am or not a literary squatter. Micheliny? Every topic is a topic to be written about. When I consider, politically, what it means to write a story about someone else. And for instance, the sound of the roar of a jaguar, if the other is a native population, and after the thunder, for instance, the case of after the thunder, if it is a mixed race, this mixed-race person, and in Walking with the Dead, this other person, this family, this evangelical family, I always consider that maybe literature is this path. It is this space, this place for you to meet what is different. Kopenawa, I always bring Kopenawa when I consider this native character. this indigenous. In A Queda do Céu, The Fall from the Skies in the free translation, Schopenhauer says something that really made a difference, impacted me when I was writing. It said white people only dream about themselves, and that the sky is falling over his head because of that, because we as a white society are only able to dream about ourselves, and we are only able to think about things that are very fleeting. And he urges us to dream about other people, about forests, so that we can actually give in and launch ourselves or dive into these other places. And we are only able to dream, we're only able to getting involved with the things we love. So when I write about the sound of the jaguar's roar or the sound of thunder, it is my way of reacting to what Schopenhauer said. I'm dreaming about what you suggested me to dream about. For those who do not know, the sound of the jaguar's roar was in chapters. Last week we launched the extra chapter that will be downloaded for free on ebook. It's called The Leap of the Greater Jaguar. This is another character called Josefa, and Josefa asks herself, because she wants to go into a native or indigenous reservation, but then she will ask herself, aren't I doing just like the scientists? Aren't I just invading territory that is not mine? So this is a very honest question you ask yourself. This is an important question. And I guess to go beyond this place of what is just a fad or a niche thing, is exactly to see this as a legitimate space and to consider that this story is mine, but it's not just mine. So I write a lot. I hope that the story of the kidnapped children will be told by other narrators, native narrators. Krenak, when he launched when the launch of my book, she said there were Krenak children that were taken to Europe the same way that these children you refer to in your book. So these stories have to be told. They have to be told by multiple narrators and multiple authors too. Well, so we have already, for 5 minutes, we said today during lunch, we talked for 2 hours. It will be the same thing. You can continue talking to them. They will be signing their book. Read Odorico Leal and Micheliny Verunschk. Thank you so much.